ways to help. The environment, there's a lot of different challenges, whether it be, physical health, mobility, brain health. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Loss of a service member. And so when we started looking into it, it gets interesting. There's people that do amazing work with equine and amazing work with dogs and amazing work here and here and here. And it came to basically, as we were doing our research, there's like 45,000 501c3s in the veteran space. And so then the idea was like, there's a lot of people doing great stuff. How do we help them do a better job and or get more information out there?
Hey there, welcome back to another episode of American Snippets. I'm your co-host, Barb Allen. Eric Poston is our guest today. He is the director of Oakley's Military and Government Program. He's also the co-founder of the Infinite Hero Foundation, which supports our military community in 5 pillars of areas of focus. And those are brain health, family support, suicide prevention, leadership development, and physical rehabilitation. Those of you who know me, know my story, know that I talk a lot about this organization called Snowball Express and the opportunity my boys and I have had to be a part of this. Snowball Express is an organization that flies families of the fallen out to a central location each year in the time of Christmas. And we get to connect and just get a little bit of Christmas spirit and energy. And my boys and I were part of the very first Snowball Express ever. And one of the major days of that event was at Oakley headquarters. Oakley opened up its entire headquarters and area to our families. Somewhere around the area of 1,000 of us were there, I think, that year. And it is still, all these years later, it is such a special memory for my boys and I. We got to do that a couple of times with them. So for me, this is another great, really good full circle moment. I'm very excited to be able to sit down and speak with you today, Eric, and share the work that Oakley and Infinite Hero Foundation do, because it is so great to know, that major corporations give back in such a way that they do. And it is also really great and inspiring to see people as citizens combine their work with those corporations to even expand upon that even further. So I'm excited to get into all those areas with you today. Eric, thanks so much for taking the time to do this with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having us. It's interesting seeing the work that you've done. It's interesting. And you sent a photo of the boys. I actually remember the 4 boys in their orange jackets in the back. So, we did have about 1,000 kids that day. And that's kind of the whole impetus of Infinite Hero. And what we do is supporting that community. We're very privileged and humbled to live in the country we do, and to see the sacrifice that families have. And your family is a great example of that, to see, fast forward a couple years, because we're not old, it's just getting older, to see those kids grow up and make a difference in their lives.
Yeah, it is cool. And I love that you do that. Even when we got home that year, Oakley had sent packages to my kids. So it was like an extra surprise on top. They still have those backpacks, by the way. Some of those backpacks we got all those years ago are still going strong in my house. Yeah. So it is just cool. And I really want to get into this because it is also, it's not just the one-time act that people do that impacts those that are doing the act too. It does have this ripple effect. And there's a lot to be said for what you do to help someone emotionally to get through a tough time, especially as this is Suicide Prevention Month. I think that is an area to talk about a lot, because just the one little, a bit of time that we had with Oakley, it really, at Christmas time, was a very hard time for my family to go through. And that moment honestly gave me the lift I needed to get through that holiday season with my boys. But let's talk about how you got involved with Oakley. I understand you were a sponsored racer.
I used to race motorcycles in my younger days. I wasn't really smart back then. I'm not real smart right now. But basically, came to California chasing a dream of being a professional motorcycle racer. And Oakley was one of my sponsors when I was with Kawasaki Racing. And when I left Kawasaki Racing and came to Oakley, I was actually overseeing the motorsports division. And my father and grandfather both served, and our CEO at the time said, "Hey, I needed some help with this military thing we do on the side." And that was 26 years ago. So along that, journey, you basically build a rapport with the community, and it's just very humbled to be around the community of service. Our veteran space, families, first responders, you build a rapport, and you just basically want to help and support. And so that was kind of the impetus behind getting involved, from Oakley into the military. And it was a natural progression when we look at, the creation of Infinite Hero in 2012. It was based on wanting to make a difference for those veterans, those service members, their families, and trying to help do the best we could to improve their lives in any way that we could.
Excellent. So let's go back a little bit because I love these backstories. I said you just came out to California to be a motorcycle racer. Where did you come from? Your dad was in the military. Were you a military brat? Did you move around?
I was, and my grandfather was a Utah Beach guy, and then my dad was was based in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is where my mother and father were from. And then I grew up in just north of Detroit, Saginaw, Michigan. So it was one of those things like I didn't basically join the service. I went to chase a dream to be a motorcycle racer, and ended up being able to contribute or try to support the community in a different method, which has been the last 26 years. So it's been incredibly rewarding. In that you just kind of have faith that you're going to make a difference and try to do the best you can to help, those people that you can, even if it's one example. It's like, especially like, as you mentioned, Suicide Prevention Month, that ability just to help or hopefully help one individual makes all the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was it about? I still want to go into this whole motorcycle racing thing because there's a lot of people that listen to us, and what we talk about is that people going out there and chasing their dreams. And I love, you can go so deep into this and all these different layers and paths and all this, but you came out to do that one thing and that led you into a whole other area. And I think that is so cool that something that you felt so strongly about, maybe did you envision yourself racing forever and that was all you were going to do? And then this came up.
The goal, you're 18 years old and you basically get in a truck and move out. And, I came out to California. I think we crossed into Southern California on December 29th, basically 2 days before the new year. And, stayed with a family, friends, and you're like, hey, you're going to make a name for yourself and, whatever, analogy you want. And then you go from there. And so it continues to, it's basically, it's an adventure. It's a journey. And I can go, how deep you want to go in the levels, it's up to you. You're the boss. But I try not to talk a lot about myself. It's not about me. It's about the things that we do. I've been blessed with an amazing life. But yeah, when you basically come out and you're in the show, you're at Kawasaki Racing, you're traveling the country, you travel the world. It's fantastic. You're 18, 19, 20 years old and you're invincible. It's like a lot of our service members. And then, you break some things and then you realize that, unfortunately you're not, RoboCop, and you actually have to take care of yourself. And when I went to come to work for Oakley, it was like a like-minded process. It was very like, how do we do things better? How do we make things better? How do we make a difference? And that's always been the ethos of Oakley. So then when you look into the military service aspect, early days of our business, we're working with a lot of the special, operational community. And those cats and dogs get things done, so it's pretty fun. It's a direct connection. A little bit of dark humor, and then you continue on.
Yeah, you want dark humor? Hang out with some military widows for a couple of hours.
Right. Have to be careful who's around because people just go, "Oh my gosh, did she just say that?"
Yes, she probably did. Okay, so now you're out there and you've moved on from your motorcycle career. At what point did you make that transition? Did you say, hey, I'm going to go work with Oakley, not just as a racer, but...
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So for those in the SEAL community, my uncle actually used to manage a bar on Coronado Island called Danny's. And so when I was 19 years old, I was racing and with Kawasaki, and it was basically like, hey, they wanted me to come off the road and basically be on the team. And I was literally sitting in Coronado Island out on the beach. And back then the big boats, were all sitting out there in the water. And so I'm 19 years old sitting in this bar having hamburgers with my uncle, and it's Danny's, and today I can still go to Danny's today, and it's a much different experience because I've been around the community for 25, 30 years. But that was the inspiration to say, hey, okay, let's move on and try something different. We've done we've traveled the world. We've had some success. We've broken some bones. And now we're going to basically transition into the kind of next chapter. And with Oakley, it was basically working in the motorsports and the racing space, and being involved in the military was just a natural selection based on my father, my grandfather, family history, if you will.
Yeah. So how did you get that? How did you get the job at Oakley? Like, what was your first
Oh,
experience?
that's a funny one. At a trade show event, having dinner across the table from a gentleman named Mike, really nice guy, asked really good questions. Didn't know he was the CEO of Oakley. So sitting there just smoking and joking like nobody's business. And next thing I know, I get a call like 2 days later, like, "Hey, you need to come visit Mike." And I'm like, "Okay, great." That was Mike. He was the CEO of Oakley. So it was pretty much a direct, much different than today's environment. It was, hey, we met at a dinner, had a conversation, and that was 26 years ago. So then, from that, simple have a dinner and have a conversation with somebody, which is really unique today. And obviously, I'm dating myself because people do everything by phone. That's basically where it started, and it's been an amazing adventure. We've done a lot of great things in the military space with building protective eyewear and protective goggles to support our servicemen and women. And, the Infinite Hero is a natural extension of that, and probably some of our, my personal, some of the proudest things I've done. So it's been, we started in 2012, and with a goal of how do we make a difference and help, whether it be, with brain health, whether it be with suicide prevention, whether it be with family support or leadership or any of the other pillars we're working on. And over the years, we've generated over $4.5 million to help work with like 36 different organizations. And along the way, the biggest thing for me is that you have these personal connections. Even like yourself, where I haven't spoken to you in years. To see the photo of your boys, it's ironic. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can remember the boys in the back of the Oakley building. So.
Yeah, that was a good day. Definitely a good day for us. Okay, so Oakley, like you said, has its own military initiative and its own line of products to support the military, the whole military government program that you all have. And obviously, like I mentioned, Oakley opened its doors to support the families of the fallen. So it's always shown this tendency to support the military community,
Correct.
which is awesome, especially for someone in that community. But now you all branched into the Infinite Hero Foundation, and let's talk about that. I think it was, I saw you and your co-founder of the Infinite Hero Foundation, you had taken a trip to Ward 64.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of I would actually step back a second. If you look back at the Snowball Express events, Barb, there was, hey, how do we support these kids and their families? And, it's kind of a classic Oakley approach. It's like, hey, this is the right thing to do. So let's figure out how to do it. And so, you were there, and I mean, the building itself is, it's 550,000 square feet. And we reached out to, athletes, so the skateboard kids were there and all the X Games stuff was there. And so it was basically like, hey, we're really, this makes a difference for these, these kids and these families' lives. And that's kind of like that same authenticity is where it started with Infinite Hero. We've been working with the community for, over the last 25 years, and you build a relationship, so, both with not just the service members and their spouses, but their families. And so, you have loss, over the, global war on terror. We've been at this a while. And so about 10 years out, you've friends that you've lost, and friends that have come back that are a little dented up. Gary and Mary Linfoot are like family. I love them. And but that's an example of someone that's come back and they've made a huge difference. But it's a little, he's a little dented up compared to where he was when he left. And Jason Redmond, another really close friend. But we have a lot of jokes about his beautiful cosmetic surgery he's had.
Yeah, we've had both of those guys on.
Oh yeah, I know. The point there is just that you build these relationships with people that are authentic and you care about. And so then it's like, how do you support them? And probably one of the biggest impetuses behind it was we lost there was a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. We lost a lot of the special operations community that day. And Colin Baden was the CEO of Oakley and longtime supporter of all of our military efforts, was just like, I walked in the building at 7 a.m. He was sitting there and he's like, "Hey, we got to do something." I'm like, "Okay." And his comment was, he goes, we need to talk to Petraeus." I'm like, "General Petraeus." "Okay." And he's just like, "No, really." I was like, "We got to make a difference." I'm like, "Okay." And it was from that genuine want to just say, how do we help? How do we make a difference for these service members and their families that are giving such great sacrifice to our country for all of our benefit? And that was the idea. So we just basically said, "Hey, let's do what we've always done with Oakley. Let's look for innovative solutions. Let's look for like-minded people that want to make a difference. And if you combine those and you put effort into it, you'll make a difference." And that's literally the idea behind it. And there's been some great events and great people along the way, and we've humbly made a difference. So I'm very proud of that.
So what was the actual moment where you said, "Okay, we want to make a difference. Here's how we're going to do it"? What was that bridge?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting, and this is, you want this to come across as respectful as possible. When you started to look into ways to help, the environment, there's a lot of different challenges, whether it be physical health, mobility, brain health. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Loss of a service member. And so when we started looking into it, it gets interesting. There's people that do amazing work with equine and amazing work with dogs and amazing work here and here and here. And it came to basically, as we were doing our research, there's like 45,000 501c3s in the veteran space. And so then the idea was like, there's a lot of people doing great stuff. How do we help them do a better job and or get more information out there? And so that's kind of, it basically kind of looked, it framed up to be almost like a venture capital thing where we said, hey, we're going to look for technologies, try to find ways to help support them, and services and different programs that have, that make a difference, that actually are like result-based programs. And that was the impetus behind it. So we just started going, and pretty soon you're, one of the first events that we, not first events, one of the first big adventures we had. We're down in Dallas, Texas at the Air Power Foundation, Skyball, and have this big, huge check, the big checks, $100,000 checks. They're like 5 foot long. And we're getting ready to present it to Gary Linfoot. And I hadn't met Mary yet. And we're getting ready to go up on stage, and she's kind of like, what is going on? What they got me going on stage for? I'm like, I don't know. Why do they got me going on stage? And I have the check in my hand. We're literally side by side. And she's like, "What you got there?" It's a check for somebody. I don't even know what I'm doing up here. And she's like, "I don't know what I'm doing up here either." And so then we walk up on stage and turn the check around, and it's for Gary for, like the whole mobility platform. So point being there that you start to build these environments where you said, hey, we're really making a difference. This technology, this iBot, this exoskeleton makes a difference for the community. So how do we do more? How do we get more iBots paid for to take care of more veterans? So it's kind of the easy version of it.
So the organization itself, you can't just sit there and say, "Oh, we're going to have this organization." And then, at 8 o'clock in the morning and then 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everything's in place and you have your board and you have all this work together. So what was it again, like specifically that said, "Okay, here's these things we want to do. This is what we're going to call it. Here's who I'm going to work with." You and your co-founder had to have a conversation.
Yeah, I had a couple. It took us 2 days. You're right. It's a little longer than 1 day. No, it's a process. Colin and I were basically sitting there saying, "Hey, what do we do? How do we find other people who are like-minded that would want to help?" And pretty soon you're piecing together, people parts, friends of friends, and you're starting to get an idea of what it should look like. And for us, it was just the founding principles, like an Oakley principle, was like, look for better ways to do it better. But, to your point, Barb, getting a 501c3 off the ground, it's easier to get a root canal than it is to get that going. But, you focus on the mission, which is taking care of the community, and you keep going. So we built it out. We basically started in, early days, we built product. We actually still have product that's Infinite Hero branded product with Oakley. So we would generate revenue for the foundation to support the veteran service community through sales of Oakley products. And then, you start to build out, fundraisers and different events, and it's definitely not easy, but you kind of build it in the way it goes. And Um, yeah.
Yes. So you mentioned,
I don't want to bore you with how many pieces of paper you have to fill
yeah,
out.
no, that's okay.
How many
It's
times
just,
you have to just like,
sometimes there's a moment. Sometimes, I ask a question like that and someone says, oh my gosh, there was this time when this happened and that happened. And this is when
yeah,
a moment where everything clicks together and it sears in the brain. So sometimes that happens. So I go down that road.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And for us, it was that moment. I mean, when we lost all those, all our guys, the next morning it was like, and if Colin's just, he's a mad scientist, big brain, big passion. And he's like, we're going to do this. So, it's like failure is not an option at that point. We're going to
Right.
find a way to help. And as Infinite Hero was basically reaching out to our own creative designers at Oakley and saying, hey, what does this mean? And a couple of them had traveled with us. So when you mentioned, going to Walter Reed, we're in the ward, and it's hard, and so those people had been, that designer Brian Takumi was with us, and the inspiration that he sees of, we're giving a Navy SEAL a hard time because he's a below the knee single amputee. It's like a flesh wound. What are you whining about? And he's just like, oh my gosh, what are these guys doing? And but it's incredibly humbling, so you basically, that was the idea behind it. When we went to Walter Reed, it was, we're going to see some friends of friends, you basically realize that, different people have an idea of what a tough day is, and it's civilian space, respectful civilians, God bless them. It's usually because Starbucks line was too long, and in the military and the service space, it's different. We went to go see an individual who was a Marine, a friend of a friend, and he was missing. He's a quad amputee, and he was so excited to see us, and he had his Oakleys above his head, and we brought him some stuff, and he was so happy that we were there, and it was it was a hard interaction. And for myself, I've been around a little longer than Colin, and we walked out of the room, and Colin's like, I don't know if I can do that again. I'm like, we don't have a choice. We're going to every damn room here, and this is gonna hurt, and you're gonna do it. And he's awesome. He's like, okay, all right, I got something in my eye, but I'll be all right in a minute. Okay, now I'm gonna go. And
Yeah.
And that's what you do, and so it's but and then you have those relationships too. It's like I still talk to that, below that, nicked Navy SEAL, we just give each other a hard time all the time. So it's good.
So you mentioned Jason Redman. How'd you connect
Yes.
with him? Everyone, those who listen to us or follow Jason know his story, but we did get to interview him back in the day, and then I got to go on his show with Ray Care, he's just a cool dude, man. But how did you connect with him?
That's a great question. I think somewhere along the line we're fan the family tree. I don't know. Jay and I had mutual friends. In fact, we were at Walter Reed at the time. He had just left, and we started connecting the dots. And I believe it was actually through Marcus and Morgan Luttrell. I met Jason, and we had different stories. And we've done a lot of events together. His family, they're back obviously in Virginia Beach, and his wife's awesome. And you connect the dots, and pretty soon it's just your extended family, So when his son's DJing, we're like, I'm like, hey, at least your kid's got good hair, and we go back and forth, and but we, different times and spaces. My wife and I were at an event in Colorado with Jay and his wife, and you just have these, really great moments of connection, of like a common interest and common care, common goals. Whether it be being patriotic, being thankful. Your kind of your faith and where you've come from, and that to me is one of the blessings of this adventure, where you really do get to connect with people that one, have made a difference, two, are continuing to make a difference, and three, that they're inspiring people to be around.
So you had mentioned also that you raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5 million, or approaching that number.
Yep.
To give back. And I like what you do. We started a similar thing just recently, our own endowment fund, for the same reason. There's so many organizations out there that are doing good work. Let's just support those people instead of competing for the same funds. But how did you decide who to donate that to? Like which organizations, what's the bar you set, or what are the criteria you look for an organization that's looking to come to you uh,
Yeah,
and submit a grant?
it's a great question. Normally my sarcasm would tell a joke, but this is actually really
No,
important.
go for it.
No, we flip coins, man. It's
Okay.
amazing. It's heads
All
or tails.
right.
No, but we have a full grant letter of interest process, and there's a questionnaire to understand what each organization is doing and how they're applying their funding. And then there's a grant committee that's chaired by people from the space. Gary and Mary Linfoot chaired that committee for a long period of time. Megan Schumacher from Schumacher Racing, other veterans in the space. And then what they're doing is they're doing the diligence to understand each aspect of the organizations that submitted a letter of interest. And then does it line up with the pillars of what we're doing? And then is it a time where we can support, and does it make sense? So, there's from the scientific community, from the veteran space, personnel on that grant committee, and they work really hard to make sure that we're doing the best that we can with the money. You'd love to have unlimited funds, and just be like yes, 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 But unfortunately, right now in today's environment, you just have to be very diligent with where you're sending, trying to get the most bang for the buck to support the veteran space.
Yeah. So do you tend to work with long established organizations, or do new organizations have a shot? Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's kind of like my Vegas gambling. It's a little bit everywhere. No, it's we've worked with. There's a number of organizations we work with. Like take the Semper Fi Fund. They're well recognized. They do a lot of great work. And so we've worked with established organizations, Team Red, White, and Blue. We were early working with them. And then there can be smaller organizations as well that are, might be more technology focused. Or if you look at the iBot, when iBot started back up again, obviously, our with Gary and Mary, they're very familiar with that product and understood it. So it made it, we knew the benefit that it had. And so it allowed us to make, that was pretty much a no brainer. So that's kind of how you look at it.
Yeah. So who are some of the people that have, or organizations that have supported Infinite Hero Foundation, and how did you get connected with them?
You mean organizations that we have supported through the foundation, or that have supported?
Some people that have donated or contributed to
yeah.
Hero Foundation, or helped you run an event, or whatever it is.
That's a great question. And it starts out, it's, if I look back at the very first event that we did, it was, we did a movie premiere in Washington, D.C. And, at the time, the Infinite Hero Foundation had a whopping, 3 volunteers, which was Colin, myself, and, Juliana, who was basically she did our community service work for Oakley. So we were like, okay, we're going to do this. And it was interesting. We basically called in some favors, called in some friends. We were in the National Geographic Theater there in Washington, D.C. And sad but true. Like, you called half a dozen of your buddies and like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And they're like, oh, that sounds cool. Then they call 6 buddies and they call 6 buddies. And pretty soon, it was interesting. So some press showed up and it was like Deputy Director of the CIA, SOCOM, they're all there. And all of a sudden we're like,
so your very first event, you get the Deputy Director of the CIA.
Yeah,
that doesn't just happen. He's not just like, oh, hey, I heard about this. I'm going to.
No, it's pretty. And that's I don't know. To me, that's the blessing of it. You're literally reaching out to your family and friends and saying, hey, we're going to do this. And they're like, okay, we're going to support that. What is it again? And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I'll never forget, they're shooting photos, and security came up and said, is this your event? I'm like, well, is it good? It's my event. If it's bad, it's his event, and it was amazing. We had we had folks from Congress, like a friend of mine was the chief of staff in Congress. Other friend worked obviously at the agency, and guys from they came out of the woodwork. We had, it's pretty humbling when you look at the photos back then. You're like, yeah, okay, rear admiral, and then you just go from there. And then you have to keep building on it. And, and you find people that really want to help, even if it's, obviously there's the military community that we know, but then you get, there's folks like a Carrie Hart, who's a, motorcycle guy like myself from background. And, He's just a huge patriot. He just wants to help. He puts on, motorcycle rides for Infinite Hero. They calls them the good rides. And, and then you just find more and more people. And pretty soon you're sitting there with John Paul from Paul Mitchell. And you're like, oh, okay. And he's like, happy to help. All right. And, and
So-
obviously I'm the redneck version of how this gets done. We, our executive director, Courtney Janes, actually has a plan and PowerPoints and all that stuff.
But there's something to be said about that, just casual interaction. I want to talk about this for a second too, because we get a lot of pushback on our platform. A lot of people love it and support it, but with any platform that has a mission and has a statement and has a message and a goal, you're going to get pushback. That's how you're reaching people, I guess. But one of the areas of pushback we get is that there's still a community, a segment of society that's determined to believe that people with any sort of wealth or massive success or level of success or platform behind them are just, selfish or unapproachable, or you cannot connect with them. They don't want to talk to you. And we do get that a lot. Like, how did you get in touch with this person? I'm like, well, I called them, or, I emailed them.
Right.
So, do you find that as well? Like, I'm sure we have plenty of people that don't respond to our calls or get in touch with us, but have you been surprised by somebody that you reached out to that did pick up and did get involved and did say yes?
Yeah, always surprised. I mean, and surprised in a good way. I'm not surprised that like, oh, they didn't return the call. I'm always surprised at how genuinely humble they are and or approachable they are. If we go back to, this is a little bit of a back, but if you go back to Snowball Express, right? We did that event. And this is kind of, I don't know if the audience really get this, but at the time we had 5 X Game gold medalists. You had 2 Olympic gold medals. They were all there on a weekend. And if you remember, like the weather wasn't great.
Well, I'm in New York and this was
right. So you don't really know,
everything was relative.
Right.
So we're like, this is awesome.
Right. But like I remember, Ryan Sheckler, who's this rock star in the skating community, Bob Burnquist, rock star in the skating community. Those guys skated for 8 hours for free. And they were just like, I still to this day, I'll see them like, dude, remember that time? I'm like, yeah, I remember that. And it's as meaningful to them as it was to even like yourself or your kids. So like, that's an example to me. Like if you're saying, hey, military veterans and then skateboarder X Games, you wouldn't like, no way.
You wouldn't put those together. Yeah.
I mean, I saw Ryan Sheckler at an event in December and he was like, hey man, I still remember that. And I'm like, yeah, I still appreciate the fact that you literally skated for 10 hours for these kids because, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. And that is cool. I'm one of those people that doesn't, know those names or that sport or that discipline, but I did know enough to know that, man, if I knew anything about this world, I would be in line with all those other people waiting to get those autographs. But as a mom of little kids looking down and seeing like, that guy just like flipped up in the air, just did something crazy, so that it was still like, we still got that. That is cool. I think that's something really important to remember and to just bear in mind for anyone looking to get out there and connect. Would you say that just go for it? Like, worst that can happen is that you don't get a call back, or
worst
a little restraining order sometimes.
I mean, the restraining order is a little much. Usually if they've told 3 times stop, but it's interesting too. Like, it doesn't hurt to ask. And there's times too where, we've got some, call it friends of the family. We're like, hey, this event, they're not going to be available for it. So we're just not going to push. But, I mean, myself, I say my prayers and do my best and see where it goes. And, you're sitting at events going like, okay, that's who that is, and it's fun. Cause for me, I'm like, Marcus and Morgan Luttrell, wonderful, just great patriots. And, you're just talking to them. And then you see other people at an event and they're just like, it's like, the Lord Jesus has come in the room, and, so it's, it just provides perspective, so very, very appreciative of people's time,
Who is someone that if you could just wave your wand right now and point it, you would call up this afternoon and they'd say yes, and they'd want to get involved with the Infinite Hero Foundation and get behind you and learn more about you?
You mean like in the current global space?
Whoever.
Oh, yes. Wow. Man.
I'm sure there's a lot of people, but like, Just
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you look at, man, that could get funky quick. Um, it's interesting. You talk about the needs of the service community. So my brain goes to who would have the biggest platform with a level of authenticity that would generate an idea. Like, let's just take suicide awareness. We've
yes.
got Task Force 22. We're trying to talk about this. In my mind, the thought that came to mind is, well, Dr. Fauci's kind of pretty big right now, but then again, you could be on this side of the fence or that side of the fence, so I'm like, all right, great. The ability to get information out, to understand how that works, and it's with COVID, it's really an interesting, it's not the right word, but it is a unique time where, because of COVID, you're seeing such an increase in challenge with mental health, for the population in general. And if we look at Infinite Hero and what we've dealt with in the community, we're used to this. We kind of know we know there's a process that you go through. There's communication, there's help, there's and so it's interesting. Like, from Infinite Hero, a lot of the things that we're seeing today in COVID space, a lot of the work we've done previously in the military space is a direct one-for-one comparison. So in the first responders and the medical personnel. So it's an interesting, that knowledge base is out there. So to really answer your question, I would, I guess I would look at it from that perspective to say, hey, who's got the most exposure, most gas? But he also wants to be a credible source, So it's like,
well,
it's like
you
I'm
can't
talking
have
about
everything.
Right. Got to pick and choose.
Greedy. All right. So you actually just touched on something that is interesting. And again, which is what we're experiencing.
Wait, everything
as well.
else was not interesting?
No, it finally just started to get interesting now. Thank God.
Good.
No, I'm just kidding.
She's like, I'm out of questions. This guy's the worst.
Oh my God, no. I forgot. Okay, here we are. So no, it was.
That's an edit, Dave. That's an edit right there.
No, we're keeping all this. So it was actually also interesting, I will say.
Yeah.
Is
nice recovery.
Yes, I'm good at that. Is that you mentioned someone like Dr. Fauci maybe having like repercussions in terms of go either way. Mm-hmm. What is that? And again, it's something we experience because our platform is patriotic. So by nature, we attract more conservatives. We get a lot of pushback from non-conservatives on what we do. Just it's the nature of the beast, I suppose.
Sure.
And so we've run into that ourselves with some people saying, hey, they decline the invitation because they don't want to be on a patriotic platform or something like that. So and we've had some nonprofits as well say, I'll have conversations with people who run nonprofits or do things. That's my community too. And like, oh, we love this, but we can't say this. I can't say this publicly because I have to separate myself from the nonprofit. How is that? Are you feeling that same pressure kind of like, do you feel like you all have to be, and I don't know what your own political views are. Because we don't ask, right? Yes.
Right.
Because it doesn't like overly matter us. Right. But do you find that in your world, because of your position with the Infinite Hero Foundation, are you getting, and it doesn't have to be specific, but just from in general, anyone saying, hey, I can't work with you because this person supported you or this person's doing that event and I don't want to be a part of that. Like, do you have to be careful or is it?
Yeah, I would, careful might be strong. I think we're cognizant of it. Careful is actually, here I'm trying to be politically correct, but a politically correct conversation. I'm like, we're cognizant of it. We're not careful. We're freaking careful. It's interesting. I mean, I like, even in the business space, even if I'd step back from Oakley, it's like, hey, blue or red or green or yellow, we protect people. That's what we do. We build the best stuff to protect people. You can be blue, green, whatever, whatever your affiliation is. I'm pretty much try to be apolitical. That said, you do have to be respectful of the fact that that there's people that have different views and they're passionate about them, and at least in the experience of Infinite Hero, we've been blessed with a lot of different people that have helped us, and there's some different views. There's a really one of our best supporters. His wife is an amazing human being. She's awesome, and she'll be pretty much on one end, and he's on the other end. And you have to know when you're talking to them, depending on where you stand, you could be right in the middle of a gunfight. So It's
I have some friends like that
right.
as
Yeah.
well. So how do you walk that line, or however it is you want to say? How do you manage, for instance, that couple that you're talking about?
Mhm.
How do you manage then to keep it mission focused, and how do you convey that to where people feel comfortable from opposing points of view? How do you break
Yeah.
that barrier down? Because unfortunately, there is one now.
Yeah. No, and right now, I mean, this year it's the worst. It's the most difficult I've ever
Yeah.
seen it. And hopefully it gets better, but time will tell. The simple answer is we try to focus on, hey, here's what we're doing. We're working on, Task Force 22 is suicide awareness, and here's how suicide prevention works, and these are the things that we're doing, and here's the science and the programs behind it. So we focus on that's our mission, right? And then, you keep a lot of finger food around, so that when they start talking about it, you just keep shoving food in their mouth, so they stop talking.
That's a
But
good plan.
but it's interesting at times, I mean, but some of my favorite conversations have been with people that are very non-like-minded. And this will go back 1,000 years, the dinosaurs on Earth. I was at a presentation in Europe for Oakley, and we were talking about the technologies that we were building. And it was a large, 400 people, and you do your thing, you dance like a monkey up there and do your thing. And when we got done, um, finished up and was kind of at a break, and this wonderful, now a dear friend of mine, wonderful French woman came up and said, "I'd like to speak to you." I was like, "Shoot, sure, here we go." And so it was just one of those situations where um, she's like, "I didn't want to hear anything out of your mouth when I heard you were speaking. I want nothing to do with this or you. And I just want you to know that I really appreciate what you said. And I was thinking about this differently. Now I'm thinking about it different. I'm still not sure I like you, but and that was, we still are friends to this day, but it was an interesting segue. She was like, she comes up and she's like, I'm like, oh, she's ready to go, so, but, but the focus was just about protection and making a difference in, people's lives. And so just allowing her to have that perspective. I didn't change her from not being a fan of American military prowess, but that wasn't my goal.
Excellent. So you've mentioned Task Force 22 a couple times now. You want to
Sure.
talk about who they are and what they do? And
That's
this is
all I
an
know.
organization. That's all you know. Okay. They just show up sometimes.
Seriously, I got a couple notes. I was supposed to say this, so. So Task Force 22, it's basically, it's awareness. Infinite Heroes putting it together with a lot of great folks, Carrie Hart, Morgan Luttrell, famous chef Jason Redmond. They're donating 22 minutes of their time. And so through a process, you can basically win that time with them to speak about whatever you want to speak about. And so it's about building community, about building connections. And in the COVID environment, as we discussed a little earlier, it's really unique because most people are staying home. So a lot of the human interactions that we're kind of that we're used to are haven't been. So it's a unique time. And so I think that, that the efforts that Infinite Heroes putting in with Task Force 22 is about awareness and about education. But then also in the greater human experience right now with COVID being in, quarantine, lockdown, give it your whatever verbiage you want. It's a unique time.
So that's an organization. Task Force 22 is an event.
Is an event.
It's an event. Okay. It's an event
program
that Infinite Hero is putting together.
Yeah, Infinite Heroes putting on.
Okay.
You can get information, the details on how to participate, how to get involved, how to support it through infinitehero.org. But it's that's an example of, like, if you look at those folks, there's all kinds of different people that want to support this cause. And not of them all are just pure military space. So it's great for me. It's just, that's one of the most rewarding things when you come across people that may or may not have your background. They weren't a Gold Star. They're not a Gold Star family. They're not in the space, and then they're around it for a couple minutes or a couple hours, and they're like, "This is the coolest thing going." And I see that. That's probably one of the coolest things I've had in over the last 25 years. Is take my wife, who wasn't around law enforcement. Her mom was a police officer, but wasn't around the military community. And so you go to a couple of dinners with the wives and husbands and wives, and she's just like, holy cow, these are some of the coolest people I've been around in my life. And then also the perspective too of, like, hey, what's a bad day? A bad day in this community is a bad day. It means
Yeah.
probably someone's not in a good spot. And a lot of folks that, whether, and again, I don't mean to condescend towards standard civilian life, but it's like, how Starbucks line was too long, Chick-fil-A closed on Sunday. Okay. It's not really a big problem.
Right. Yeah, it is perspective. Perspective is key, isn't it? It's an excellent thing to have. All right. So if people want to find out more, I know you just mentioned it, but let's do it again. If they want to get involved with the Infinite Hero Foundation, if they have a grant that they want to submit, or they want to donate money to you, or they want to run an event.
Yeah. So, I mean, any information or support for Infinite Hero would go through infinitehero.org. And there'd be information on the program, for Task Force 22, information on our fundraising programs, information on the different programs we've done. I mean, we work with over 36 different organizations. There's a lot of great information, mental health, family support, leadership. There's a lot of different resources there. And, and it'll give you some insight as to what Infinite Hero is and what we're doing. And, during this time of COVID, it's difficult for fundraising. It's an interesting time. So, there was a study came out of the East Coast on the banking side, and 501c3s by definition, you raise money, and then you're trying to give it all away, right? That's great until you can't raise money, and so it becomes a really pressure packed space for all the 501c3s in the country, not just in the veteran space but across the board. So have different ways to connect with people and get the message out of like how to help. It keeps it fun.
All right. So one thing we talk a lot about here at American Snippets, and it's part of why we started this platform, because even 3 years ago, we noticed the division was getting out of hand in this country. Yeah. And we had no idea it was going to continue down this path, but we just figured we would be the voice to speak against the division and anger. We'd focus on the positive things. And one of the things that we defend is the concept of the American dream. We believe that the American dream is in fact alive and well and available to anybody who wants to work for it, regardless of your situation or your background. But we understand the key difference in the cookie cutter American dream. We know that doesn't exist. We know the American dream is unique to everybody. And everyone has their own vision of it, their own ideas, their own pursuits. So I'd like to ask you, what is your version, Eric Poston's version of the American dream?
Wow. Should have seen that coming.
If you had listened to any of our other podcasts, you'd know that we asked.
No, I did. I know. And I got all kinds of notes and none of them make any sense.
Sit on a throne of lies, you said he was.
Exactly. Okay. No, fibs. Okay. Misdirection. The American dream, it's interesting, traveling the world quite a bit. I've been blessed to do that. I'm definitely, our country has faults. Humans are flawed. My own personal beliefs, if you look at the Bible, humans are flawed. We're going to live in a broken world. That's how it's going to be. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't always work towards improving these things. And being able to travel around, I'm blessed to be an American citizen, and I'm thankful for it. And there's a lot of work that it takes to get done. So when I look at an American dream, myself, when my mother and father, when we moved up to north of Detroit, it's because they eloped because they had me, right? So I was in early days and a welfare kid, and I've had a job 5 days a week since I was 11 years old, and I was blessed to be able to worked in a farm and clean the building, and and so you keep working, and then before you know it, like we're trying to race motorcycles, and then you get an opportunity, and I come here, and the point of all that is not about me, but it's just like there's an opportunity, and it's tons of hard work, and I think everybody's got a plan for their life. But it's not easy. Nothing's a given. So I think the ability to actually be in America where you have an opportunity, is it easy or is it guaranteed? No. But travel to countries where you don't have that. And people of, having a wife and 2 daughters, being a female, you don't get that comment in a lot of countries that we wouldn't really think about it. But, to the point of just being like, we have the opportunities, and there are people that will be like-minded that will want to support you if you put in the effort and if you apply yourself. And there's so many great examples of that, in our country, whether it be, Major James Capers. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, you look at some of these people that come through and you're just like, okay, that's a hard life. You got people like an Elon Musk, like I don't know him, but it's interesting to see what they build, so it's, given the opportunity to, take a swing and, bat and make a great life for yourself and your family. For me, I'm humbled by it and thankful for it. Probably not the best answer you've got. We'll probably have to retape this.
No, it's good. It's honest. And you hit on a lot of the same things that we believe. And I always love to hear the recurring themes that come up because over and over, people have worked hard and made it happen, say a lot of similar things about going to different countries and
Yeah.
seeing it, getting perspective and all that. And it's a point that we like to continue repeating over and over and over because we believe in it
Yeah.
ourselves as well. So when we hear our guests say it, it just confirms that, yes,
Yeah. And it's a really interesting time. My oldest daughter's 21 and she'll be a senior at UCLA, and she's a walk-on athlete on the women's gymnastics program. She earned herself a scholarship. And so it's really interesting to be around kids. And I say kids, they're young adults. And their passion, and I think it's interesting, you have perspective. If, you and I look back to when we first met at Snowball Express, your world has changed since then, right? You and I maybe got 1 or 2 years older, but your perspective has changed, If I think back to when I was 18 and traveling out here to California, I thought I was the smartest thing in the world. Now I'm not even close. But the point there is that, being around all these really young adults that really their hearts are great and their intentions are great. They just their life experiences are limited. The first time that, they got that paycheck, for doing coaching, and she's like, what is this FICA thing? What is this? And so, you start to build that acumen. And, I think a lot of the ideals that are out there, global peace and everyone have a home and everyone have food and everyone have security. I think those are all great human ideals that we should all work towards. Unfortunately, they're not easy to come by, and it's kind of idealistic. Like, do you still believe in Santa Claus? Well, I'm a version of him, but it's going to take some work. So.
Excellent. So is there anything that I have not asked you that you would like to talk about, especially?
It's all a blur. I can't remember anything.
Yeah. Especially in regard to Infinite Hero and its work and its mission. Where is it going in the next few years? Is there a message that you want to get out there at this point in time?
This is probably a little bit off the cuff, but it's it's such an interesting time with nonprofits. The data is not good for the nonprofit space. It's like probably half the nonprofits will not make it through this section of pandemic. So as far as what's on the horizon for Infinite Hero, I think it's continuing to focus on helping, serving our community, finding ways to continue to support in mental health, physical rehabilitation, leadership, et cetera, but also, how it's going to take the connections it's going to take to keep that going. Like, how do you raise awareness? How do you raise funding to create that awareness in this time? It's a unique time.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. And I very much appreciate everything Oakley in particular has done for families like mine.